All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Q3 MarTech Masterclass webinar around the total relevant market, your ICP, and how to operationalize and get the most out of it as you start to look, obviously, to your second half. But for most people, this is a really foundational point that folks want to get right as they head into their 2024 planning. So fortunately, we are joined today by our host, Lindsay, who is going to walk us through the specifics. Most people are familiar with the total addressable market, but we're going to talk about the total relevant market today and the differences there. And Lindsay is just the person to lead us through that conversation. So Lindsay, take us away.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm honored to be part of the Masterclass series. So a little bit about what we're here to do. We've got a bunch of our fantastic clients here that are going to be helping us out and providing their perspective on developing your ideal customer profile and how to activate that to be more efficient. So we've got Neil Shaw from Sendoso, Monique from Drift, Tom from Demandbase, and Christina from Path Factory are all going to be joining us today. But before I let them talk, and they're going to very graciously let me give you a little bit of a primer on ideal customer profile and where we're at. But before we get started, before we get started on the specifics, just wanted to give a little bit of background on go-to-market partners. We've created a framework that really seeks to encompass the entire go-to-market team. As far as we're concerned, the go-to-market team includes product, sales, marketing, customer success, revenue operations, and enablement. And there's a lot of activity that happens across all of those teams that allow us to take our incredible products and services straight to the market and get them into the hands of our future customers and buyers. But as a part of that process, it's pretty complicated. And I know a lot of what the people on the phone here with us today do is pretty complicated. So we're going to get into the details and spare no detail on this one. So I'm going to pre-apologize if that's not what you're here for. So kicking us off with the power of total relevant market. When we look at what many companies have been going through over the past 8 months, as we've continued to deal with some of the economic uncertainty and what that's doing to the buying market is there's been a significant shift in the amount of money and the amount of resources we have to invest in identifying the right people to be speaking to about our products and getting those products sold through. So there's been a lot of latency in people's pipeline, a lot of difficulty in developing enough pipeline to even hit our top line revenue goals. So there's a lot of headwinds coming our way. And one of the things that you can do to start to slacken some of the power of those headwinds is to make sure you're focusing your efforts on the right people every time you make an effort. And so when we talk about total addressable market versus total relevant market versus already in market, that really is the difference between spending a lot of money on people who could buy your product, spending a lot of money on people we would like to buy our product, or spending money marketing to people who are already ready to buy a product. And really the goal here is that we want them to select us. So when we talk about TAM, we often are talking about the need for, that's the investor pool of people. That's who we tell our investors, like, this is all of the people in the world that could benefit from what we do. Total relevant market, those are the people who will really have proven to be really successful in using your product in the past, or you built a solution that's custom purposed to fit their needs. And then AIM are those people that are actively shopping, and those are the people we want to capture. So when we think about our total relevant market, there's 4 steps that go-to-market partners really leans into. The first is we need to come up with that ideal customer profile. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to gather and validate beliefs. I always like to say, if you were to ask a salesperson, and you guys are welcome to throw this in the chat, if you were to ask your sales team what they consider their ideal customer to be, what would they typically say? If you were to ask your customer success people, would that be the same group of buyers? If we were to think about what product has built for and the solution that they've been working towards, does that happen to be the same? And then what about marketing? So when we think about all of the different perspectives, there's a lot of biases involved in developing your ideal customer profile. And it can be it's really important that we get all of that information together. Then what I like to do is look at, okay, compared to our current customer base, are we talking about a massive shift in the way that we are approaching, or is this just a slight tweak on the people that we've already sold to? It's of course really stabilizing if you could say, look, 80% of the customers that we have currently in our book of business, they're the buyers that we're going to continue to go after. That's fantastic. For startups, extremely lucky. For most of us, extremely valuable. But if we're looking to do something different, like go up market and really attract a completely new audience that we've never interacted with before, what is that shift in messaging, shift in behavior, shift in resources going to do to our existing customer base? And can we afford to do that? In addition, whenever we're talking about ideal customer profile, there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of different technology solutions that can help us scale that motion. And do we have the data sources that we need to legitimately find the people we know we need to find? And then finally, we know we can't spend all of the money we want in attracting all of the people inside of that audience. So how do we score who we're talking about? And then how do we focus our resources at those highly scored accounts and spend less time talking to those accounts that we know are not necessarily going to yield the results that we're looking for? All right. So when I think about this anecdotal feedback, so I asked you that question. I did not get any answers just yet, but that is okay. When I think about product, typically when you ask your product team, why did you build, who the ICP is, they're going to talk about who they built it for. A lot of times this can end up coming really to pass in terms of that switch from a SMB mid-market buyer to an enterprise buyer. Enterprise requires investment in security and investment in customizations of your backend. It could just get really complicated to support being a part of a larger, more complex, more heavily locked down tech stack. And so if product hasn't built a solution that serves that need, they're naturally going to pull away from the idea of, look, we should sell to enterprises. When we look at marketing, for my marketers out there, for those of you who are required to hit a certain pipeline number, chances are your ICP is going to be a little more heavily driven towards the places where you know you can generate the pipeline required. Sales, on the other hand, sales are the team that I say always suffers from recency bias. Typically, their ideal customer profile is their last 5 or 6 successful sales. And so if you've successfully sold to them the past 6 times, that becomes your ICP. And you want marketing to help you find more of those successful sales cycles, regardless of what the product was built for or what marketing's expectations are in terms of pipeline. And then finally, my customer teams will often talk about the customers that are either less maintenance to service, or the customers that are legitimately leaning into the product, the customers that are paying attention and using the solution the way it's meant to be used, are constantly pushing up against the borders and barriers of its capability set. So they will be focused on that. So all of this together allows us to build a customer profile that's not just based on the kind of bread and butter firmographic, the right revenue numbers, the right industry, the right number of employees, or the right physical location, but it also allows us to lean into other aspects like technographics, where we could be looking at complementary solutions or a level of sophistication, or we could be talking about qualifying characteristics. This is really big, especially for anything that has a seat-based solution, being able to understand what are the potential number of users at this company, what are the number of team members, what are the typical roles that allow this solution to be leveraged really effectively. So all of these different pieces of information, some of them are scalable through technology, and we're able to use a contact provider solution to help us understand more about what's happening inside of the organization. And some of this is things that we can ask through our marketing, through forms, through lead forms. These are things that can be done in the initial conversation with an account executive or with a BDR. These are the fact-finding elements that we can bring to the table to really qualify if they are truly a part of our total relevant market, or if this is somebody falling outside of our ideal customer profile and might cause us pause if we're going to spend a lot of money and time trying to sell to them. Finally, readiness to buy. That's just that incredible ability with all of the technology that we have now to capture buying signals, as well as some of the tried and true. Have they recently been funded? Are they growing in their investments? Are they spending money? Are they buying other companies? All of these are indicators that they're willing to invest in their business and their go-to-market, and there might be an opportunity for us to take a look at what they're doing and be a part of that story with them. So when we're thinking about operationalizing the ICP, when we've got our list of characteristics, and one thing I would like to say here, so this is a rather long list. I do find that what we don't want to do is we don't want a list of 15 elements that we have to start tracking, right? It's too hard for people to understand and remember, and too many questions to ask. So I like us to get to like a top 7. And I want it to be a mixture of firmographic, technographic, qualifying, and then layer on top that readiness to buy aspect. And so when I'm operationalizing it, I think about defining the ICP characteristics. So let's get to that top 7, maybe 10, depending on how complex your business is. Consider your customers, collect the data, and score and scale. So this is an example of a sheet that we work through with our clients that allow them to break down, these are the technographic elements. These are the technographic elements that will benefit us. And it's also important when you're doing your ICP work, who is not your fit? So I always love to have a couple of characteristics outlined that just, if that customer fits into that industry, that technographic set, into that intent trigger, that they're just not a good fit for you and we'd like to avoid them. So your ICP should have elements of industry, for example. So this is a firmographic element, and we have some positive scores, but in the category of government nonprofit, that's just not something we serve well. And therefore it's got a negative score as compared to a positive score that you can get. So whenever I'm scoring, I love this idea of like a set of negatives and a set of positives on a sliding scale. So when you're looking at your characteristics, what I want you to do is think about, okay, if it is a negative, so like our government example from before, why are they a negative? Do they churn at a higher rate than average? If they do, and this is a great question to ask your customer teams, who is churning? What are the characteristics of the people that are churning at a higher rate than average? And get that information from them, validate that data, and then use that to kind of build your negative definition of an ICP. Maybe there are people inside of your customer base today that consume resources at a higher rate than average compared to the rest of the group. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It depends on how much money they're bringing in, of course, but it's a question worth asking. Or is this kind of a shot in the dark? We're not really sure if we can support this characteristic well, or if this is going to be new for us. And so we'd score that at a -1. On the opposite side, we can service, but we can't grow them. So they will buy from us, but there's going to be no path to future purchase. Or they can buy from us and we have a competitive advantage. So what can happen here in these +1s? These can become bake-off feature by feature conversations, which can draw out sales cycles and take a little bit longer. So what you'll find is your +1 characteristics tend to take longer to close than say your +3 or your +5, where you have a clear competitive advantage. And then our ideal customer elements are those that we have a clear competitive advantage and we have the ability to grow with them. So this gives you an idea of your non-ICP and your ICP segments. And you build this out according to all of those characteristics we reviewed before. And that gives you a really analytical way of looking at your ideal customer profile and then establishing the total relevant market that you have to work from, as opposed to that total addressable market, which is typically the number we give to our investors.
Hey, Lindsay.
Yes.
Really quickly on this piece. So I've experienced this firsthand, and it was definitely a tricky situation, right? Because if suddenly you identify accounts that churn, right, and say, we probably shouldn't sell any more of those, right? But sales on the front end, if the way they're incented is initial deal only, right? They don't, I mean, I hate to say it, but they don't really care if it renews or not, right? Because to them, they get paid on the initial sale. And so what have you seen work? I mean, I've seen some things, but what have you seen work to kind of balance that out between sales and post-sales and getting sales to care about the renewability of a client. And really, I mean, the cost to the organization, because as we know, for most companies, a new customer is not profitable in year one, right? So it actually costs the company money. So how do you kind of align sales with those business objectives?
That's a great question. So there's a couple of different ways to approach it. So if you are in a hunter-gatherer type mode where you've got net new AEs that are only focused on net new, you're going to have to put some back-end controls on who they're selling to before you pay them, which is not going to be a particularly comfortable conversation when we're thinking about our comp planning. But again, we're here talking about next year. So this is the time to start having those conversations. So we can put controls in on the comp side of the house. I'm a big fan of putting bonuses for salespeople that are selling within the ICP. Typically, if you can bonus salespeople properly and build a comp plan that allows them to thrive in the overall goals of the organization, they'll do what you want them to. So I'm definitely a high proponent of bonusing or paying more for ICP, and even potentially if they're bringing in -5s, maybe not paying at all on those sales. That will very quickly change the situation. Now that's a tough culture change to take care of. So there's other things that we can do. Another thing we can do is if AEs are paid more for customers that renew or have longer term relationships, they're also going to pay more attention to who they're selling to. If you've got that strict net new versus account management motion in place, then they don't care. They're not thinking about 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. They're thinking about their current quarter, which is what we've asked them to do. So there's also kind of mixing and mingling a little bit more the idea of they're net new, but they can retain ownership of that customer for 2 to 3 years after the sale. And then I guarantee you there's going to be more benefit to the organization for managing that account. Finally, the last thing we can do is if it is a heavy, if a lot of the pipeline is being driven by marketing and sales isn't self-sourcing, marketing making sure that the only opportunities that are showing up in front of those sellers are fitting within the ICP is really, really critical. And I know a lot of teams are going through the process of marketing is bringing in leads, marketing is qualifying those leads, they're throwing out things that don't match the ICP, and sales never sees it. So if sales isn't doing a ton of self-sourcing, marketing can actually control this on the front end as well. So there's a little bit of mix and match, but it definitely has to be a collaborative conversation. And if we're going to continue to pay sales for anybody that walks in the door and kind of not pay attention to the ICP at time of sale, then the rest of the company trying to align to an ICP might reduce costs here and there. But at the end of the day, it's not going to have the meaningful go-to-market efficient impact I think we're all craving.
Yeah, and listen, this is a really interesting conversation, and something I want to add just from a Sendoso perspective, right? Because this is exactly what we solved for 6 months ago. So historically, Sendoso has sold into sales and marketing teams. So some of our ICP buyers are demand generation managers, ABM managers, customer marketing managers. And last year, a lot of our customer base was SMB, right? So we sold a lot of SMB deals. And then as the market shifted this year, we started to see that budgets are really tight, right? So the same SMB customers, we now have a little bit of problem of them churning because they just don't have the budget to renew. And so the way we solve this challenge is as a marketing team, sales team, and CX team, we actually all came together with this problem, really got alignment. And what we introduced was a new offering called a Sendoso Express. It's basically a freemium model. So for SMB customers who don't have the budgets, they can instantly get started on the platform, right? So that removes a barrier of not having the budget. And as they see success within the platform, they can go back to their executive team, and as they start to scale, they can upgrade to more paid packages. So what we've seen is, okay, we've had a churn problem. We introduced a new solution to serve that SMB market, and our paid packages are more for mid-market and enterprise. So that's kind of one of the ways we solved it at Sendoso 6 months ago.
That's fantastic. I know one of the things and that's why I love you guys all hearing about this today and now, as opposed to 3 quarters from now where things are already in motion. I've got a couple of clients that are in the process of doing that very same thing, Neil, but they don't have the luxury of, they don't have a technological solution that really lends to a PLG motion. It's just not what they do. And so what they've had to do is they are shifting up market. They're pulling away from SMB, but two things are happening. One, the incredible BDRs that were doing a great job sourcing small business opportunities, now they're running into more walls than they used to. And it's a lot harder to get a significant quantity, especially in the shift period. Eventually you'll kind of normalize and get to the right goals, but goaling on 100 meetings for SMBs, just from a pure quantity perspective, is a lot easier than getting 100 mid-markets or getting 100 enterprise meetings. And as a result of that, they're starting to feel as though they're no longer contributing the way they could. They're not making their commissions the way that they used to. And so they're not being paid appropriately, even though the overall structure of the organization would much rather them focus on the non-churning, more higher value, higher dollar clients. It's just a better fit for their business. So when that happens, it's just being aware that as you're shifting your ICP and as you're going through that experience, there are going to be, you have to look at every piece of the go-to-market engine and ask yourself, is this team going to be negatively impacted? So if marketing has to deliver 100,000 leads when it's SMBs, do you think it's also possible to deliver 100,000 leads if they're enterprise? You have to ask yourself that question, really do the math, work with those teams and figure out what the new goals are going to be, what the new comp is going to be, and not just pull the rug out from underneath go-to-market teams, because I guarantee you what will end up happening is everyone will follow the process for 2 months. People will quit. People will move on. People will find ways around the ICP and they'll go right back to where they needed to be in order to hit their goals. And you'll be having this exact same conversation again next year.
Ooh, I feel like, Lindsay, maybe we need to have a follow-up webinar on SDR compensation, because I feel like they are so key to so much of this, right? Whether they sit in marketing or sales, right? They're that central point, like you said. If you tell them, hey, you're not going to get credit for any, leads you pass to sales that don't fit our ICP, guess what? They don't pursue and they don't send any leads to their sales counterparts that don't fit their ICP. It's pretty simple, but once again, then you have to think about their compensation. Is that going to decrease their quantity and so on and so forth? So it's tricky business, but important.
So I'm curious for the rest of our experts on the phone, have any of you gone through this shift before, when you've gone from having a little bit less of a stringent ICP, more of a TAM approach, and then narrowed down that pool of prospective customers to be more effective for the organization, but potentially putting some constraints on teams that were not used to constraints and they had to change the way they did business?
I think it's more for, in my experience in the past, it's really been, and hi, this is Christine from Path Factory. The complexity of having more, you say ICP, right? But if you're an enterprise and you have multiple products and product lines, you have multiple ICPs, and then you can run into competing sales forces. You can run into the complexity of trying to deal with multiple personas that you're going after, or segments, et cetera. So I find the biggest challenge, is what you were saying around the enablement piece. I mean, yeah, there's the comp component, but there's also just the old habits die hard, like you were saying, right? You do so much enablement, you think everybody's ready to go. You've got new messaging and positioning, it's all there. And then you listen to a sales call and they're still doing the old pitch from, 18 months ago or something. And so I think the change management element is the most challenging. And I think it's something that requires repetition and continuous reinforcement by leadership to make sure that it sticks. That to me, the biggest thing is what you said with they do it for a little while and then they fall back onto what was working before. And so it may work in the short term. And I think there's the strategic element of making decisions about short-term gains versus long-term strategic priorities. And that's a balancing act, like you said.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it can feel like less volume is going to be less revenue. And that's a really scary thought for a lot of people. We spend so much of our careers trying to create demand, generate more leads, generate more at-bats for the sales team. And we went through this effort about 4 years ago, probably first at Drift when I first joined. Previous to having some sort of TRM, we went after all accounts. We didn't have any sort of like target account list for our marketing strategy. We just tried to create as much inbound demand as possible. And we sent all of those accounts and all of those leads over to the sales team. And when we first started talking about this idea of putting a line in the sand and saying, we're not going to pass over these accounts. We're not going to actively go after these types of accounts. We're going to focus on the things that are going to turn into healthy customers. Our sales team had a lot of worry about it at first. So there was a lot of conversations about how much is our volume going to decline? What impact is this going to have on pipeline? But it was a continual reiteration of this is a long, like you said, Christine, a long-term strategy. It's something that's setting us up for success next year and the year after, rather than just creating a ton of pipeline that's not going to close in quarter. And so it can feel a little bit counterintuitive, I think, to cut off that volume, cut off the things that are closing really easily, but it has paid dividends over and over again for our business being on the other side of that 4-year time period where we rolled it out. And one other thing I'd like to say too is that we continually iterate on this over time. Each year we revisit the model, rerun the numbers on our healthiest customers. We make tweaks to it to keep getting better and better over time, narrowing down further and further in on our ideal customer, the ones that are going to be healthiest, because what worked 3 years ago is not going to be what works today.
I think one thing to bring up with this too, right? We're talking about data and creating segments and ICPs with data. We sometimes don't always have all of that data. And that's something, internally at Demandbase, we've kind of looked at and said, okay, well, how do we want to focus while knowing that the world is not perfect in terms of what we know? And what we've done is, to Christine's point, it's enablement. It's getting these insights around that focus segment in front of the SDRs, in front of marketers on a daily basis. But we've actually kind of broken out our teams in terms of who's focusing on, TAL, ICP, TRM, and we actually have a team that focuses on accounts or people that are outside of that, right? Because there might be an up and coming SMB that just got 50 million in funding. There could be an account that we have in our system that we're missing, 6 out of 10 data points on, and that's not hitting these segmentations that we want to focus on. But so I think the one big thing here, like in what Monique said, is going back every year, revisiting this criteria, but also doing it with the lens of no matter what you have, it's never perfect. And you could have a really, really great account that's missing a couple data points that's going to fall outside of those insights if you have too much of a hyper focus on the segment.
I love that perspective. I think we're definitely in a place where we're not advocating for throwing out blanks, if you will. So, and I love what you had said earlier, Christine, about you're going to have more than one ICP. If you are selling into non-uniform segments, so in this case, we have an SMB segment and an enterprise segment. Quick sidebar, bit of a pet peeve of mine. I definitely understand the concept of an SMB sale is very different from an enterprise sale, but I think it's a little too simplistic to only consider our segments in terms of the size of the organizations that we're selling to. While they do have a lot of similar characteristics in the way they transact, it still puts us in a strange position as marketers, as product people, and as customer people. There's going to be a lot of variation under SMB, and there are going to be, to your point, Tom, incredible SMB accounts that are hyper growing that look very small in an employee count, but they're very sophisticated in the way they work. So I think there's a certain amount of, there will never be, we don't want to just stop here at these firmographic characteristics, call it a segment and walk away. We really need to be diving a little bit deeper. And it's very possible that the use of the correct solution is enough to push people over the edge when it comes to the composite score of that particular account. It's really important to keep your open mind. And even if our revenue number is not ideal, if we see enough technographic ideal elements popping, then that account is worth talking to. So here's an example of how we've split up. We've got 2 segments, SMB and enterprise. And in this case, from a company revenue perspective, in the SMB world, our product, which we're going to pretend that we are selling a coaching product right now. Our product, an employee coaching solution. We just know that the 1 to 2 million range does not work well for us. We know that in the SMB segment, 2 to 10, it's when people are investing more in coaching of their employees, and at 10 plus, they're investing more in coaching. When we look at an employee count perspective, again, these two tend to follow suit, but they don't always. So really making sure that we have a definition of both a revenue and an employee count perspective is important. Here we can see that at a certain point, we have a lower tolerance for taking on too many human beings inside of an organization. We only have so many coaches that we can deploy at any given time, and any account that's at that 10,000, we're going to, or we've never serviced, in this case, we've never serviced a 10,000 person company. So jury's out as to whether or not we'll be successful, but we could perceive a situation where that definitely could occur. So by breaking this down into each of these individual elements, a company could hit as a 5 here because they're 10 million, but maybe they only have 10 employees. This would kind of neutral each other out into saying, okay, we're at 0 with this account. What else do we understand? So then we can drop it down into the technographic segment. And so in this case, if they use an OKR technology, chances are they are going to be more interested in an organized approach to the way they're managing their employees. So in this case, if it's if they are not using an OKR technology, then it's going to be a lot of work for us. Our CS team is going to have to potentially teach them how to set goals, and then they're going to have to coach them to those goals. So a little bit more resources than we'd love makes them not an ideal customer for us. Whereas if they have a solution like Workday in place, that means they're much more likely to have an individualized plan for each of these employees that's being executed on, and therefore the coaching solution really would fit really well. And we know that we have several clients that use Workday today that we're servicing, and they are extremely happy, and they provide us opportunity to grow, and they are not churning. So these are all different elements that we can take into this profile and use this information to build this composite score across a couple of different elements. And that also protects against if there's a blank. If we have no understanding of an OKR technology, we don't score them as a -5 because we don't know. It's just a blank. It's just a 0, and we won't ding them for it, but we also won't add value to them until we have a little bit more information. So even though this is a relatively complex way of looking at it, by breaking each individual piece down and really getting into the details with your team, this is the type of thing that across 7 elements can be done in 3 meetings. And I really would encourage all of you to have those meetings this summer as summer's winding down and going into your Q3 planning. So you can be really talking about your business from the perspective of ideal customers and not just anybody you could sell to, and then building a bunch of risk into your system that could cause problems. So speaking of the data, and I'm so glad that you mentioned this, let's talk about the different types of data that we have access to when it comes to identifying our ICP. And it always you can almost kind of put it into 2 buckets of first-party data and third-party data, but I feel like even that's a little simplistic. So we've broken it out into 5 categories. So there's business and market intelligence. What industry are they in? Have they recently acquired another company? All of the things that's happening inside of a business that let us know that something good is happening, or maybe this isn't the right time to approach that customer. And I apologize if you guys can hear my protectors outside of my door. They do not know that we have a webinar going on. Account and contact data. Intent data is a huge way of observing, again, that aim, that audience that's in market that we really want to focus our dollars on. Engagement data is another, they've already interacted with us, they've interacted with our brand, but what are they doing with our brand? And how are we going to use that to, again, decide who are we going to focus on today? Who is most likely, are we most likely to be able to move across the line that's a healthy future customer for us? And then, of course, I showed you a lot of data points. The ability to do account scoring is really, really helpful, because there's no way that, and for my marketing ops teammates here on the phone with us right now, I don't know about you all wanting to try and do all of that work by hand every time a lead comes across the system, but I think it would be very uncomfortable. So having a way of mechanically scoring your accounts so that you know where to focus and you can help sales look at the right things at the right time is really, really critical. So with all that, I'd love to start, Christine, from your perspective.
I'm up first.
Yeah, you are. I'm sorry. Your
it's fine.
your brand name was first, so I picked on you first. So I wanted to hear a little bit about what you find really relevant as a leader, and then also what PathFactory specifically offers in terms of the engagement and the scoring and the business market intelligence, all of that great stuff that you bring to your customers.
Well, I'll do my best to answer this. So first of all, I love how you break this out. I mean, the reason I came to PathFactory from Forrester, Series Decisions, and other practitioner world, the reason I landed here is because I love what we're able to do with data in PathFactory to optimize journeys, optimize experiences for that ICP, but also to help us understand who our ICP is, right? And refine that as we go and use the data to understand that. So we're a content, AI, automation, and analytics provider. For those that don't know, we basically can spin up digital experiences that marketing, sales, or support can activate with target audiences behind any ad, click, social post, website, CTA, etc., and drive people to these playlists or these personalized, very contextual digital experiences. Now we capture first-party intent data as they engage with those experiences. What's great though is we have integration with Drift, we have integration with Demandbase. So we take the third-party intent data, marry that with the first-party intent data that we collect as people interact with our content experiences, and then use that to drive personalization with AI and automation for the external audience, but also for the marketer and seller. So they're both looking at the data and saying, here's who's anonymous and known engaging in an account. Here's what they've engaged with, asset formats, from which channels, for how long, with which topics, and then provide AI-driven recommendations on what the next interaction should be to continue to move that ICP through a purchasing decision process and convert more of those anonymous engaged account members into known contacts. So to me, I'm looking at all of these and thinking, oh, we do all of this, but it's in partnership. I think one of the important things too to understand is, like, when we talk about operationalizing TRM or ICP, there is no one solution. Like, our foundation of data is audience data that comes from us, PathFactory, your marketing automation, your CRM, and your intent data. That's you need all of those to get your intent data. Then the engagement data, that content performance. How is the content engagement? What are the interactions and the touch points? What do they mean? And then the data about the content itself. So something I've been saying for a long time is content is data and creates data. So you need to understand what the content's about, what the format is, what the topic is, and then also, as people interact with it, what's actually happening between the dynamics of that aboutness, for a lack of a better word, and who's engaging with it. So I want to hear from other people too, and I know everyone else probably does. So I'll stop with that for now. Does that make sense? Am I making sense to you when I say that?
Absolutely. I love that idea of there is no perfect tech stack. We believe in that very much at GTM Partners. People are going to have different use cases, different audiences. You have to look at your audience first and decide what they need. And if they need a lot of information, PathFactory is an incredible solution. That way they can go through and do the research they need to on what you offer, the services that you provide, the product that you service, and be able to kind of learn at their own pace and follow a path of education, really like completely built by the marketing organization. It's very, very cool. So I love that. Monique Drift for a little bit from you, because you guys have an interesting blend where you are obviously collecting a bunch of first party data in the really famous part of the Drift system that I think we're all really familiar with. But tell me a little bit more about how Drift helps marketers operationalize that information and then align it to what they've determined their ICP should look like?
Sure. The way that I think about it is that the CRM is the basis for distilling all of this information across enrichment providers and intent providers and helping you understand how you're doing, what are the accounts we need to go after. For us, Drift is the focal point of how we execute that within the market. So I think like a lot of other B2B technology brands, we have a decent amount of inbound traffic coming to our website. And there is a huge wealth of data that we get from the conversations that we have with our customers. So what Drip does is it's an AI-powered conversational platform where you can create personalized experiences or automation-powered experiences for different audiences across your site. So one of our big messages is that you can get rid of forms. You don't have to have forms. You can meet the customer or prospect where they are, when they are at their site, and talk about the things that are relevant to them. And so over time, our platform learns about the accounts that are coming to our site from all of the information that it ingests from our CRM, our ABM or intent platforms, our enrichment providers. It brings that all into one place, and then it says, what are those people talking about? What pages are they on? What playbooks are they interacting with? What are they saying they care about to the SDRs and the AEs and support personnel who are engaging them like on the front lines through chat on the website? And then it will help us personalize what experiences, what messages, what paths we bring them throughout our site to optimize for conversion to pipeline and opportunity. So on the front end, the visitor gets a really streamlined, very personalized, very smart experience where they're actually either engaging with a very smart bot that kind of knows what they're looking for and then pulls in a human to help engage them and bring that to the next level. So I think it's kind of a combination of collecting all of the data and understanding it, and then using that like technology arm that combines the human experience and AI to really make it happen in a way that's seamless for the customer at the end of the day.
I think what's really important when I think about Drift and the creation of those experiences in Path Factory for that matter as well, is you couldn't, even with the progression of AI, which has really honestly leapt us all forward, a really big jump over the past 6 months, and generative AI and the power of being able to interpret people's needs without having to like manually program every possibility that could occur. There's still a limit to our ability as marketers, as people working to cover every need inside of our TRM. And so people aren't going to respond to generalized messaging. They're just not. They're looking for the things that speak to them directly. And so really making sure that you are identifying your segments really strongly, identifying the problems of those segments, and building the content experiences, building the chatbot experiences that is going to lead them down the path of a solution. Problem-oriented content, not just selling content. All of that's really critical. And to do that for everyone you could sell to, one of my favorite mistakes that ends up happening with our clients is we'll ask them like, well, who can you sell to? And they'll tell us all of B2B. I can sell my product to any B2B person ever. And as idealistic as that is, and while I hope that our clients one day achieve that type of market saturation, the reality is that we couldn't possibly market to every B2B, and we're going to have to make some choices. And those decisions happen as you're developing. They're going to happen two ways. One, they're going to be a decision that you make as an organization and you work together to achieve, or it's going to be a decision that's made by the people on the ground who can only do so many things in a day. And they're going to have to make calls about how many different chatbots they can build and who they're going to speak to and what information is going to be presented and what content they're going to build. And so having a structure where everyone's working together is going to be a lot more powerful than individual teams kind of building to the best of their ability to try and speak to everyone, when the reality is they need that direction strategically to do their jobs well.
Can I just say one thing? And I definitely want to hear what Tom and Neil have to say here too, but just piggybacking on what you just said, when you think about the complexity of the buying, I just kind of want to like put a counter to what you just said, because all of that's true. But also we do have to think about buying group complexity in B2B, and the fact that even if we do have a segment and a target key persona who's going to be the champion, all that, there are going to be a lot of touch points with a lot of personas in a buying group. They'll be, and the buying groups get larger and larger, you know, so we've got IT and the finance person and the procurement, and, you know, it's not just the line of business buyer or the end users that we have to influence anymore. So I think I'm probably setting up Tom pretty nicely here with this comment, but you know, that's why I do think that it's, and you think about how much content fuels the buyer journey now. So we really do need to, when we think about TRM and ICP, think about content strategy in a very different way as buying group complexity increases, and how to operationalize that data, like you said, about the content itself. Because like we said, how do we build these drift experiences without a corpus of content, right? So it's all just food for thought as people digest what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so Tom, I'd love to hear from you on, especially when I think about demand base, you guys cover a lot of these categories that I'm looking at right here. You have a really robust solution, and I think from a data backend, especially with the bringing in of intent data, marrying it with the engagement data, you have a contact and account data as well. Like you're swimming in information, which I think is probably a positive and a negative. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you bring all of that information together and make it actionable for the people who use demand base.
Yeah, I think insight rich is definitely where we're sitting on a daily basis here. And I think really what's great about it is the fact that we can marry it all together. And what we do is kind of similar to like how we set up a TRM or ICP, we go account down, right? We'll look at make sure those right accounts, those right people are there, and really start with something that we call like the account journey. And it's kind of similar to a people funnel, except we're talking about accounts. And what has that account done, either from an intent standpoint, from anonymous activity on the website, or even getting specific into buyer groups, right? So you could set up things that say, oh, a top of the funnel account has one target persona engaged, right? Or two target personas engaged at a certain threshold, right? We want to see third-party signals, like maybe highly surging or trending intent signals from the account, or maybe third-party signals like a G2 trust radius style. You know, we looked at your pricing page, we compared you to vendor ABC. So bringing all that together and then creating a very simplified way for a marketer or a sales rep to understand that with what we call a journey stage, right? Maybe that top of funnel is interested or aware. And then as they move further down funnel, we produce, you know, marketing qualified account for an SDR, an AE, a marketer that can go take action on. And I think one of the beautiful things around this is that data that we're producing on an account journey level can be sent back to all the partners on this slide today, right? The drift experience, the Path Factory experience, you know, the Sendoso gifting we're going to give out is different if you're enterprise aware stage customer, right? Enterprise aware stage new business. If you have certain buyer groups interacting, we can send that information. So there's a succinct experience across your entire tech stack. So you have your marketer saying one thing, your sales rep saying the same thing, your chatbot saying the same thing, the right content saying the same thing. It's kind of like this beautiful dynamic experience because you've aggregated this information, you've simplified it, and then shared it across your stack.
Right. And that married with what's in those partner platforms like Adrift or Path Factory or Sendoso is really what allows you to drive meaningful personalization. Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, and, you know, we work with clients that have, you know, all of your technologies or like technologies, right? And, you know, and that's why at the top I said that this discussion around ICP, total relevant market, building a target account list is just so foundational to all of this, right? Because if people don't have that level of focus, they don't know what to do with your technologies, right? I'm sure you guys have seen this. This is why clients churn, right? Because they don't have the focus, they don't have the strategies, they don't know what to use, you know, the different technologies for. I mean, like chat got a bad name in the past, right? Because it was like, oh, it's just tire kickers, people who are wasting our SDRs time, or, hey, you know, most of the people that, engage in our chat are just looking for customer support or blah, 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 right? But when you actually have, focus lists, you can decide, hey, do you even turn chat on at all or not? Or is it just a, conversational marketing versus a live chat bot based on where somebody fits in your segmentation, right? Those sorts of things. Sendoso, gifting is expensive, right? If you don't do it thoughtfully, right? And so having that kind of baseline and that segmentation and really understanding who are your best options, leveraging the data in like a demand-based tool to say, hey, okay, at this stage, we know they're super top of the funnel. We want to send out gift cards to get meetings, but what they're at this part of the funnel, this is where we want to surprise and delight them, right? Because we really want to make sure we get that deal signed, right? So we're going to give a different level of gifting, right? But once again, we only want to gift to those that are a good fit for our organization. So, all of this type of stuff really plays into, how you leverage all four of these technologies, but also how organizations definitely see the ROI of their investment in these four technologies and these strategies. So.
Yeah, and with that, so Neil, I'm going to hold on to you for a second because I'm going to ask you a question on the next slide because I feel like we've got a fantastic transition. Jessica, thank you. Talking about ROI within organizations. And this has been a really big topic. It really, as we started to see the slowdown in the economy towards the end of last year, and a lot to your point, Christine, the buying committee expanding, quite frankly, well beyond the personas of our typical buyers. There was a lot more people being involved. And even though I think, back in the day, we would have said that 6.8, the buying committee, average buying committee size is 6.8. I think that probably the involvement of those individuals has increased significantly, specifically at a leadership level. And that's created this idea of what type of ROI is meaningful to each individual within the buying committee. It's not just enough to talk about ROI on itself. And so what we've done is we've split ROI into 5 categories. So the first is the one that I think we all know and love, and that's attributable ROI. And essentially what that's saying is I'm going to put $3 in and $10 is going to come out on the other side. It's really easy for me to say, and Neil, when I think about Sendoso, you guys have a strong case for this. We sent this gift. This deal was signed 10 days later. We have a really strong connection between what we've done and the amount that you spent, and then the eventual deal that you signed. There's other solutions, products or services out there that are transformational in nature, where we don't have to prove that $3 has to come into the machine or $3 comes in and $10 comes out to know that we've done great things for a business. And so transformational ROI is kind of that big shift to, maybe we don't need to staff as many people and we can use a generative AI solution to change the way our organization interacts with our customers, for example. So there's a transformational story there that maybe we can't 100% prove investment equals revenue, but we certainly know that we've benefited as an organization because of the way that we work today compared to before. The other 2 opportunities are efficiency and necessity. So efficiency ROI is very similar to attributable, but it's a cost savings calculation. It used to take me 10 people to do it, and now takes me 3 people to do that. I invested X in order for that to happen. My payback period on that investment was 11 months. I'm happy, you're happy, we've achieved, we will continue. Necessity, on the other hand, is just the expectations of your buyer, whether it be I expect to sign contracts digitally and I don't have a fax machine and wouldn't know what to do with a fax machine if I saw one. Or, it's the type of things like InfoSec and app security requirements that must be adhered to now, depending on the type of business you run. So it is a cost of doing business, and it's an expectation that you're going to spend money on it. And then finally, indirect. This is the tough place. And there are many, many companies that live in this indirect. I've worked for these companies before where that your solution provides improvement to one aspect of the business, but it would be difficult for you to stand up and say, I take credit for that sale, or I take credit for that lead coming in, because you are a part of a larger story. So these are the 5 types of ROI. And when you're thinking about your business and you're talking about ROI to a CFO versus the head of a specific department versus the individual buyer or your users, they're all going to have a different point of view on what this is doing. So I think what my goal in talking about ROI with all of you, and Neil, be ready. I'm going to ask you a question, but when you're thinking of your business and where your ROI is for your customers and across those buyers, I always like to break it into two concepts: extrinsic ROI and intrinsic ROI. These are the stories that we're going to tell. This is the proof that we're going to put in front of our buyers. This is going to drive the content, the personalization, the ICP that we're going after. All of this needs to be connected to the idea of, am I an attributable solution where I could go out and build an ROI calculator? And there's a lot of great ROI calculator firms, or you can build it internally. And it's very clear to the buyer, do this, get Y. Very investment banker perspective. This is the type of information that's really helpful to a CFO making a decision, because maybe they're not as close to the details and the needs as everybody else in the buying committee. And this is really all they have to go off of. The transformational stories, on the other hand, this is intrinsic ROI. So this value is brought by the feeling that people have of interacting with your solution. That's the feeling that you're driving. That's the overall performance that you're indicating. If you're a transformational solution or an attributable solution, you're in the offense. You own the story. You can unequivocally prove, or you can control the narrative of the value you provide in a really specific way. And that's how you're bringing ROI to market. If you're in the competition zone, efficiency is great, but there's going to be 10 efficiency projects inside of any organization. So what is it to say that your efficiency project of the 10 possibilities inside of that organization is going to be chosen? It's a highly competitive place to sell and interact and market to. So it's something you are going to have to build a stronger engine to support as you go into competition with not only your direct competitors, but also everything else happening inside of the organization. And necessity, really what it comes down to, the right features for the lowest price. You're really pushing yourself into a cost, unless of course you're so sticky that it's easy to inject you, like a CRM, right? They've got the benefit of, it's very painful to undo your CRM, but you have to have one at a certain scale of business. So CRM sits in this necessity, and they're very sticky and comfortable, but not all necessities are sticky and comfortable as a CRM. And then sitting down here and avoiding this. So I'm curious, Neil, from your perspective, when you think about the people, the product that you're building, are you thinking about attributable solutions? Are you thinking about transformational? Are you thinking about efficiency? When Sendoso goes to market talking about their value, what are the key value points that they hit on from an ROI perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think at Sendoso, the way we've sort of built a story is we're one solution that's catered to many different teams and our ability to deliver ROI. So as I mentioned earlier, our ICP ranges from demand generation managers, ABM managers, customer marketing managers, SDR, and sales leaders, right? So especially in this sort of environment where you've got to be able to sell to multiple business units and really deliver ROI across your solution. I would say from a positioning perspective, Sendoso is definitely that attributable sort of feature or characteristic. And we've done a lot of customer interviews. We build case studies very frequently, and what we've seen is success around, okay, if I'm a field marketer, I was able to use Sendoso and have 70% more registrations. I'm a customer marketer. I use gifting as a solution to target my existing customer base for upsell and expansion opportunities. And I saw 50% increase in net retention rate, right? So in terms of like attributable, like like I mentioned, we have clear statistics that demonstrate ROI of our solution across all these different sort of ICPs. And then talking in terms of transformational, like if you look at just sales marketing teams, they're struggling with pipeline. They want to accelerate their deal velocity. So if we can come in as a gifting solution, get them 4x higher engagement of the cold emails that they're sending out, or even get 6x more conversion to meetings booked, that is where we're really transforming their business, because without gifting, they were able to, let's just say, do X, and suddenly with using a gifting solution like Sendoso, they're able to 4X that same sort of business, right? So that's where we're able to come in and completely transform their business and solve challenges around pipeline, sales, and customer success, right? So I would definitely attribute Sendoso into the winning zone.
I agree. I agree completely. And I know we are officially at time, Jessica. So I just wanted to kind of let everybody know that as an analyst, I've had the opportunity of looking at all of these solutions relatively in depth. And I think that there's attribution, transformational, and efficiency, and quite frankly, necessity aspects of a lot of what they're doing. So highly advocate for taking a look and seeing if their use cases can help you in your business and your planning for 2024. But I hope that you found this session really relevant. Jessica, is there anything else that I didn't cover that I should have, even though I'm officially 1 minute over? Oh, you're on mute.
There are so many things, Lindsay, but we only have you for an hour. So I really appreciate your hosting today's session and all the value you brought. And thank you to all the rest of our panelists for bringing your individual point of view and your personal experience to the table, because I think this was a really good conversation, once again, to set people up to start their 2024 planning. So thank you one and all.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks
Okay.
for having us.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.